All right, so it's time to pull this B-Series lump out of my CRX, and I wanted to show you a technique that I've learned to pull these engines in and out of these cars without the use of a hoist. So if you look here, the frame rail actually kind of blocks the transmission from being able to pull straight out of the car. Same thing over on this side. It's just really kind of tight. The length of the engine from the crank pulley all the way over to the very end of the transmission, it's basically about the same width as the distance between the frame rails, so it's really tight. When you start taking into account the motor mounts sticking out over here and over here, it's actually a bit of a challenge in from the top. You usually end up having to use a kind of a balancer and get the whole engine on an angle like this, and that's really the only way that you can get them in and out from the top easily. So I found it's actually a lot easier just to let it out from the bottom. There's a lot more clearance down there. It can just come straight out. The only thing you've got to do is remove your radius rods from your traction bar, or from the the normal stock subframe that's in there. If you do have that stock front subframe, you may have to remove it entirely. I can't remember. I haven't worked on one of these with the stock subframe in there in such a long time. But so what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to go ahead and take the head off, and the reason for that is that once we get the engine loose, it is got to slide out from underneath the core support. So I've done it before with the head on. I'll post a couple pictures here. This is basically having to lean the engine over and drag it out from underneath the core support, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to leave the shift linkage and everything on there, so I want to just keep it upright. So I'm going to take the head off, remove the head studs. That's going to allow me just to drag everything out from under the core support without having to lift the engine, without having to lift the chassis up so high that it would clear. So I'm going to go ahead and start with that now. All right, so we've got the head off. Went ahead and pulled off the header as well, and then I disconnected the shift linkage back there from where it attaches to the car. The shift linkage is still attached to the transmission. I didn't want to have to deal with pushing out that roll pin punch, that roll pin that holds it onto the transmission. It'll be a lot easier once it's out, without having to be under the car trying to bang it out. So we're basically ready to take it out. All right, worked up a little bit of a sweat there, trying to get those bolts out of the T-bracket. But if you look here, you can see that we've got the engine side mount is removed. The transmission side mount has the bolt out, so there's nothing stopping it from going straight down. And I got all the bolts out of the T-bracket, including the rear mount there. I left it in for now because it should just, the engine and transmission should just be able to go straight down off of it, and it's kind of hard to finagle that thing out of there. So we're pretty much ready to get it all the way out now. All right, well, there she is. It was a little stop and go there for a minute. I find that kind of the most difficult thing is really trying to figure out where to put the jack stands, where to get the jack, where you can get the engine out, because it's real easy to jack the thing up in the front, but of course that's the highest part. That's where you got to try and pull the engine out through. So I had to kind of finagle it around a little bit. I ended up putting the jacks under the lower control arms in an area where they're under compression, which is not ideal because it lowered it down a little bit. It's also not ideal because the rods for the traction bar are not attached, so the suspension is not really triangulated. You know, it can move forward and backward. So I've still got the jack under the front here. It's not putting a ton of pressure on there. I mostly just wanted to make sure I had something there just in case, you know, it did fall off the jack or the jack came down too quickly or anything like that. You always got to be safe. So engine is out. You see the shift linkage is still attached there. I'm going to go ahead and push that roll pin punch out, to get the shift linkage detached, and you know, put the suspension back together so I can set it on the ground. I don't like leaving it like this, you know. I want to make sure it's real nice and secure, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, but you guys don't need to see that. I think we're done here. Hopefully this was useful to you. If you ever find yourself in the situation where you don't have a hoist, honestly, I prefer to do it this way with these EFs and CRXs. The engine bay is just so tight that you really got to take it out from the bottom, in my opinion. So this actually works pretty well. I mean, by the time I had gotten a hoist all set up and everything, I don't think it really would have saved me any time, and I don't have a hoist right now, so that kind of made it so this is the way I had to do it. But hopefully this helped you. Please subscribe if you want to see other content like this. I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff with this CRX. I've got some big plans for it, and also got more technical videos coming out. So we'll learn about all sorts of interesting things, some real kind of advanced tuning topics. So until next time.